Now, I love fall, but I'm in the mood today to make a tumbler that is fall-inspired, but not using traditional fall colors. So I found an image on Creative Fabrica. I'm going to sublimate that on this Go to Craft tumbler using my Go to Craft Auto Tumbler Press. If that's something you're interested in, sit back, relax, and let's get started. Here's the tumbler that I'm going to use today. This is a Go to Craft tumbler. I really like how it has this window in here, especially if you're gifting it or you're selling these. I think that's just a nice added touch. It comes with a metal straw and a cleaner. And then inside the box, you have the tumbler, the lid, and then you have the little rubber thing that goes on the bottom after you sublimate it. I want to figure out what size to print my image at. And different brands are different sizes, so make sure you don't skip this step. I have this measuring tape. I really do like this. When I was looking for one of these tumbler measuring tapes, I chose this one because you have down to the 16th of an inch. A lot of them only went down to a 10th of the inch, and I wanted down to the 16th to be more precise. So when I pull this tight, I see that my tumbler is 9 5/16 inches in diameter. So I just asked my Alexa to divide 5 by 16, and that gives me the decimal that I need. So 9 5/16 is 9.3125. So I just rounded up to 9.4. I like to have a little bit of overlap so that when I trim my paper, it's not too narrow. So that's how I measure around. And then to measure the height that I need to print it, I'm going to do what's called burying an inch because I can't see down here whether the measurement goes all the way to the end or if it's set in a little bit. Let me show you what I mean. On this ruler, it doesn't start at 0 all the way to the left. It's set in a little bit. And so I put the 1 inch mark at the top of the tumbler. And looking down here, I want it to be about 8 inches long or tall. Even though it says 9, remember we buried an inch. So I want my paper to end up being about 8 inches tall. I'm going to print it at 8.1. So I'm going to have a diameter of 9.4 and a height of 8.1. Now, I found this super cute image on Creative Fabrica. Let me go ahead and print that, and I'll meet you right back here. I think this is just a super cute pumpkin spice design. I love pink, and so I thought this was really cute. The other thing is light colored designs and the designs that aren't a solid color at the top or the bottom. Those are very forgiving designs, and you don't have to tape as much on those. I still tape a lot, but if you have a lot of white at the top and at the bottom, you can get away with less. Now, I like to use a rotary cutter and a metal ruler that has cork on the bottom, but use whatever you'd like. If you want to cut with scissors and you can cut really straight, that's fine. A guillotine cutter, just whatever works for you. And I cut a tiny bit of the ink off. That's just so I make sure I don't have any white left that's up against the tumbler. Because if any of your tumbler has white against it, a white line, then that's going to show up in your final product. Let me go ahead and cut this down, and then we'll get the tumbler taped. Now to place this on my tumbler, I'm going to flip my tumbler over, flip my design over, and I have it down on the tabletop or my cutting mat so that I know my paper's about even with the top of the tumbler. Okay, that's perfect for me for the diameter. I like to have one side barely overlap the other side, so that's perfect for me. I have this little tumbler holder that helps. I made this. I actually made a video on it. If you're interested in seeing that, I'll put a link to it. It barely cost anything to make. So to start with, I'm going to put one piece of tape in the middle. And I'm going to have it pretty tight. Then what I want to do is look at the top of my tumbler, see if the paper is at least at the top of the tumbler. And to me, I like it to go barely above it. So I'm going to put my hand in there, just kind of tap. And I went too far. You don't want it that far over. All right, I think that looks good. Hopefully you can see that that paper is just ever so slightly above the top. Pretty much even with the top, there's a slight curve, and it goes just above that curve. Now that I have it where I want it, I'm going to go ahead and tape the rest of the side seam down. I want to make sure that I get the tape on the side of the paper that is on top. So this side is slightly over this side. And get it attached to that side. And then just make sure it's nice and tight, nice and snug. I'll do the same thing on this end. Now this is the top of the cup, so I can just fold that over the top, and I can just fold this over the bottom. Now, honestly, there's more at the bottom than I really prefer. I typically would have cut that excess off, but we're going to go forward. Let's see what happens. I'm just going to have to be really careful where it wraps around because you can get terrible pucker marks from that. Fortunately, this is a very light design, and so it might be fine. I'm going to go ahead and tape the top first. I want to see which side of the paper's on top. Start on that side. So this side was on top, so I started over there. And I'm going to pull this firmly, but not so tight that I stretch it. That's what I do with the first layer, or the first piece of tape. And then on the second piece of tape, I'm going to really stretch it, if I can, and I'll have it about halfway off the tumbler. So, just like that. Okay, I'm going to hold this, and I'm really going to stretch on this tape. Now, like I said earlier, this is a very forgiving design because it's very light at the top. There's a lot of white at the top. And so any little bits that don't sublimate that well at the top or bottom, we're going to blend in a little bit with the white tumbler. So if you are a beginner and you want to pick designs that don't have color at the very top or at the very bottom, those might be good ones to start with. Okay, so I have that tape pushed straight over. Now I'm going to look for any puckers. I can see one right here, right here. Let's see if it shows up in the camera. Now I've lost it. I want to find it and I want to push it out with my nail. Or with my finger. Okay, I just want to get it tight up against the tumbler. Another thing that I can do is I can press this against this cutting mat. I just want it tight against the tumbler. All right, so now I am worried about this bottom, but we're going to go forward. We're going to see how it turns out. Again, since it is a very light color, a lot of white, a lot of light pink, I think it's going to be fine. Otherwise, I'd probably take this off, reprint it, and cut that off. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a piece of tape, not at the end of the paper. But at the bottom of where the paper is going to make a really good contact with the tumbler. So where it starts to curve under. I'll show you what I mean here in just a minute. I got off a little bit there, but you see how my tape isn't quite to the end, and that's because that's where it's still up against the tumbler, and then it starts folding over. So I want that tight against the side of the tumbler. Let's hope this eliminates those pucker marks. And then we'll do the last piece like I did on the top. I'm going to stretch this and get some rebound effect. Then I'm just going to go straight over the tumbler. Now you're going to see some of this ink on the bottom of the tumbler, which I don't love, but I made a mistake. I didn't trim it down. Now you can also use something that's hard rubber. I'm just going to use this little tool, press them all out. And then once again, we're just going to rub this really hard on this mat to try to fold that paper so that it is all really nice and tight against the tumbler. All right, hopefully that works. I want to show you a really close view of the top of the press. On the back of the press, there's a little red toggle switch. I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. And you can see there is a setting for stainless tumbler. Let's look at that. It's going to be 365 for 50 seconds. After 50 seconds, it'll rotate and it'll do 50 more seconds. There's a setting for glass cans. There's a custom setting that you can set to whatever you want. And then here's for ceramic mugs. This is the one that does not rotate. You don't want to break off that coffee handle. Also, any of these other presets can be changed if you find they don't work well for you. But I always just stick with this stainless tumbler. Let's let that heat up. We'll change the camera angle. And we're going to see how this tumbler turns out. My press is up to temperature, and I have what I call my heater tumbler in there. It's the same tumbler that I use to heat up all my tumbler presses. Most presses say to have something in it when it's warming up. It's supposed to make the life of your tumbler press last longer. Let's go ahead and take that out. And then I'm going to wrap some butcher paper around this tumbler just to protect the pad on the heat press. Now this is HTV Ront sublimation paper. I've never had it bleed through the back, but I think it's a good practice to still go ahead and wrap these in butcher paper. When I do that, I want to keep the butcher paper off the bottom because this is going to be setting on something and I don't want it to crinkle up. So I keep the butcher paper off the bottom. I'll go ahead and slide this down into the press. I should probably wear the heat resistant glove when I do that. Now to get this to close up, there's a button right here that says start. Now if you see that paper poking out, that's just the butcher paper. If you don't want that to happen, you could tape your butcher paper tightly to your tumbler also. We're down to a few seconds, so this is going to open up, it's going to rotate, and then it's going to close back up on its own. Now the tumbler's actually rotating, the paper is not. And that paper sticking out like that actually bothers me. So next time I'll go ahead and I'll tape down my butcher paper. That way it'll be tighter and it'll rotate with the tumbler. Now time's up, so it's opening up. And then this time I definitely want to have a heat resistant glove on. We'll take that out, we'll set it here. I'm only going to let this cool for the amount of time that it takes me to get my camera angle changed. So within a minute or two, we'll go ahead and take the paper off. I am very impatient when I make sublimation tumblers because I'm just in a hurry to see how they turned out. This is still pretty hot, so I'm going to use my glove. I like to just snip the tape, being very careful that I don't accidentally cut into the tumbler or scratch the tumbler coating. I do the same thing at the bottom. And then I really want to get a peek at this before I show you, but we're going to look at it at the same time. If something's wrong, I want you to see it too. All right, are we ready? I'm going to take my glove off. All right, please be good. Oh, that is so sweet. Well, this is still pretty hot, but I can handle it. That is really, really sweet. Very, very cute. The top seam looks really good. There's the back seam. Now, I didn't even realize it would line up like that. That's pretty nice. It's not perfect, but it's close. I see a tiny bit of white right there where I must not have had my paper meeting, but it's not bad. Now, here's what happens when you have your paper long enough that it wraps around the bottom. You do get some color on the bottom. I have something black on my tumbler there. Let me get that off. But you have some color that wraps around the bottom. Again, because this is a very light design, and because there's a lot of white around the bottom, it's super forgiving, and it still looks great. I know these aren't the colors that everybody loves for fall, but I love them. I think they are adorable. So go ahead and put the lid on. I'm going to leave the straw in this so that whoever I give this to has a clean straw. And then we'll put this on the bottom. You want to try to get it as centered as possible, or if you don't, sometimes your tumblers can be a little bit wobbly. I have done that. And then once I have it in a place where I like it, I just flip it over, put a lot of pressure against it, get it on there really nice and tight. So here is the final product. Let me know what you think. And do you like non-traditional fall colors, or would you prefer to see this in oranges and golds and greens? Thank you so much for joining me. And until my next video, bye-bye.